What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another episode of Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We are a group of guys helping each other make progress towards each other's goals. If you're new to the channel, awesome and welcome. If you want to help support the channel and join our pro team, head over to rhomasteam.com/pro, where you can contribute to us on a donation basis. We also give you access to exclusive content, mastermind groups, etc., etc. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the team.
Fucking Lego, man. So I'm gonna try and see if I can move the camera forward.
That was perfect timing, just as we hit live. Love it. Got the guitar in the background and everything. Dudes, what is up? Mr. Ray, what's up? Mr. Kaizen.
Good morning, gents. Life is good. God is great today.
And Kaizen, just so you know, we still can't hear you. You probably know that, but just in case you don't know that. So, dudes,
I like having him on the screen, though. Just his wisdom is like hitting me by osmosis, right?
Love it. So we started reading the book called Tribe by, what's the author's name? Sebastian Junger. I think that's how you pronounce his name. So we want to start going through that with you dudes. We want to start really making the conversation super productive. Yes, that is the book that Ray's holding right now, Tribe, on homecoming and belonging. Ray thought it was a great idea to have this as our first official Rhomas book club, and I completely agree. So Ray, I'll let you lead the charge on this. We're going to go through chapter 1. We're only going through chapter 1 today, right?
Oh yes, but I'll also start with the 3-page introduction, where so we're going to hit 5 points that really were meaningful for me. I'm gonna bring up 5 points that were really meaningful for me. The introduction, where a homeless man took responsibility for the author when he was hitchhiking as a young man.
Yep.
The self-determination theory of happiness or a meaningful life, which is having autonomy, confidence, and community. Happiness and why happiness, why rates of depression and whatnot are so much higher in the rich world than in the poor world.
Mm-hmm.
Native tribes and holding babies and staying together, how native tribes manage to have much more meaningful relationships and communities than us.
Yep.
And then the 5th one is something special. That's some unique stories about native tribes in the colonial period, where people would be kidnapped in native tribes, and even after they're rescued, life was so dope tribal life was so dope, they'd run away back to the tribe to get away from the modern life, which is kind of a oxymoron, right? Like leaving medicine, maybe plumbing, maybe, prosperity. So the book starts with a little introduction where the author Sebastian Junger says that he was growing up in the suburbs of Boston in the 70s and 80s, and there was never any kind of struggle or sacrifice or duty or any purpose in life. Neighbors were protected by large hedges if you knew them at all, and so he wanted to go out to California, and he hitchhiked. In my mind, what waited for me out in Dakota and Wyoming and Montana and California was not only the real America, but the real me as well. So again, like I've said before, the vein through this whole book is a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. What's my calling? Another great quote: how do you become an adult in a society that doesn't ask for sacrifice? How do you become a man in a world that doesn't require courage? And I think this is something we hit on a lot in Rhomas, is a mature, modern, nuanced sense of masculinity.
Yep.
Right? So he's hitchhiking in Gillette, Wyoming. He's made as far as Gillette, Wyoming. A kind of rough-looking guy comes up and asks him, "Where are you going?" He says, "California." He says, "How much food you got?" And Sebastian, the author, figured he was about to get robbed. So he's saying, "I just got a little bit of cheese." And the guy says, "You're not going to get to California on just a little cheese. You need more than that." The man said he lived in a broken down car, and that every morning he walked 3 miles to a coal mine outside of town to see if they needed fill-in work. Some days they did, some days they didn't. This is one of the days that they didn't. So I won't be needing this, he said, opening his black lunchbox. I saw you from town. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. And he gave him his lunch, bologna sandwich, apple, bag of chips, which was probably a donation from a local church. But what imprinted this experience in the author's mind, and he put it in this book he wrote 20 years later, that yes, he was generous, but a lot of people are generous. What made him different was the fact that he'd taken responsibility for me.
Yep.
Which is something we aspire to do in this men's group, this men's mentorship program, where we hold each other accountable to our goals, right? So he realized that, like, humans don't mind hardship. In fact, they thrive on it. What they mind is not feeling necessary. Modern society has perfected the art of making people not feel necessary.
Yeah.
And it's time for that to end.
Yeah.
So that was my first point that I wanted to discuss. This brothers taking responsibility for each other.
Hell yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I guess I'll throw it back at you. To you, what does that mean to you within the context of the group?
Well, I think it means when a brother says he wants to lose weight, like you're the supreme example of this, Wes. Like, you're probably, whatever you are, 149 pounds, like 0 BMI, body fat or whatever. And if one of the men says, I want to lose weight, you're like, you're on, it's a challenge. We're going to have daily weigh-ins, you and me. And, and Wes, you'll say something like, based on my doctor's instructions, I can only lose another 3 pounds, but I will lose that goddamn 3 pounds. You know what I mean? Like, the way you gamify and compete friendly and wrap the challenges in friendly competition,
right,
is a way, whether you know it or not, is a way of taking responsibility for your fellow man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, my comment to that would be absolutely, and right back at you, and same with Kaizen and the rest of the dudes who show up here regularly. I think an example of what we could do here as men to show responsibility for each other is go that extra mile, right? Like almost quite literally like that guy did in the book. And sometimes that just means making the extra comment, obviously with always respect, but the hard thing a man has to do for another man, at least in my opinion, is give him tough love when needed, because nobody fucking else will do it. Like, especially if you're doing good in life, right? Like I know that Kaizen is an outstanding performer, but if he tells me something where I can say from my heart, hey man, like, here's something that came up for me, and there's ways you can word it, right? Like, here's something that came up for me that you might want to consider. I don't know if it'll help, but if I didn't hold that back, and oftentimes society holds that back because they don't want to seem weird, they don't want to seem condescending or whatever. But if it can honestly help Kaizen, number one, it shows that I'm actually listening to him. And then number two, it shows that I'm actually willing to, like, kind of take a little bit of a risk because he might say, fuck you, man. And I hope that and I know he would do the same for me and vice versa, and right back at you. So that's what responsibility means in the context. And Ray, I appreciate your compliments, but going that extra mile for the men in your group, I think is super important. And Kaizen, I don't know if you can talk, but feel free to riff off any of this stuff.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I had my mic, I had it turned off. My bad. But kind of like tagging on to that, it sounds like it gets hyped up a lot, that book, like Ultimate Responsibility or Accountability. I forget what, I can't think of the dude's name right now, but basically, like, in society right now, it's very in vogue to have the government be your daddy, to be reliant on somebody else making decisions for you, to basically be a passenger and not the driver. Instead, what this is kind of like elating to is more like not only being able to be self-sufficient and take care of yourself, but bringing so much of that to the table that you're able to take care of other people. And then by doing so, you ask a little bit more. You're like, okay, I can do this, this, and this, but what I need is for you to do this, because that helps me do this. So if you're asking for help, here's what I need you to do. If you want me to help you, this is what you got to do in return. You can't just be in a position where everything is done for you, because at that point, that's not even like really living. That's like putting up the bumpers at a bowling alley and the ball is just going like there's no life at that point. Everything is decided for you. You're basically like a video game that's
You're in a coma.
Pattern. Exactly.
Yeah, and so I just looked it up. Ultimate Accountability is by Jace Babcock and Rocco Slamick. It's got a great subtitle. Ultimate Accountability, How to Be Awesome at Everything. And what you mentioned there about just being passengers and letting the government handle it comes up later, where he says, as modern society reduced the role of community, all of us taking care of each other, it's simultaneously elevated the role of authority.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like socialism might be kind of, socialism is problematic for me because it is, yes, there's an emphasis on community, but it also puts the decision making and in the hands of the authority, and it's top down. So I really like that contribution, man.
Love it.
The next,
Well, if you don't mind, I want to add one last piece, just the way I think about it in my head. When that guy walked up to him and said, basically wanted to give him his food, I think there's a lesson in there for all of us men. It's like, even if you only have a ham sandwich, like that guy did not have anything else. Like he only had one thing to give. So it reminds me of the Little Drummer Boy song, which honestly, like every fifth time I listen to it, makes me cry. Like I wish
every time, Wes, come on, every time.
Oh yeah. Like if I'm around people, I try to like hold it back. But it's like, if some of the guys are thinking, well, I don't have anything to give, it's like, I promise you, even if you have a ham sandwich to give, you've got something to give, right? Mm-hmm. And in that, you are valuable. There's always something to give. There's always something of value to give. So Ray, I appreciate it. What's the next point, brother?
Hey dudes, sorry for the interruption here. Just wanted to let you know, if you want to join our pro team, go to romasteam.com/pro. You can help support the channel. You will also get access to exclusive content, masterminds, one-on-one sessions, etc. All right, back to the episode.
Okay, so the next point I wanted to bring up was so we're jumping around a bit. The self-determination theory comes up on page 22. And this is, the context here is why are there such extraordinarily high level rates of depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, suicide in more prosperous countries?
Yeah.
Right? The self-determination theory, and there's a great video on the self-determination theory that we looked at recently in the scorecard session, and it is basically like this. In order to have a sense of self-determination, people need a sense of community, a sense of autonomy, and a sense of competence. And this is like the secret sauce, right? So like, competence is mastery over your role in your company, your family, your tribe, and a sense of wellness that comes out of it. Autonomy is behavior that is self-endorsed. I'm doing this. I like that I'm doing this. You feel like you're making choices are made wholeheartedly and that you're doing what you want to do. And then community is your tribe, your sense of belonging, kinship with others, mattering to others, right? And so in the book, and there's a great learning segment on online, where they get the whiteboard and it's like an animated learning segment. It's fantastic. Self-determination theory, which holds that human beings need three basic things in order to be content. They need to feel competent at what they do. They need to feel authentic in their lives, so I use the word autonomy back there. And they need to feel connected to others. And there's a bunch of interesting studies he cites. For example, Mexicans born in the United States are wealthier than Mexicans born in Mexico, but are far more likely to suffer depression. Corporate lawyers that get paid a fortune have much higher levels of depression than public defenders. And my favorite example is, by contrast, so corporate lawyers wind up with higher rates of depression. By contrast, Amish society has exceedingly low rates of depression because it is theorized many Amish remain utterly unassimilated into modern society to the extent they won't even drive cars. So it's like the trappings, again, and this is something that echoes throughout the book, is like the trappings of the comforts of, credit, modern medicine, all the prosperity comes along with it a separation from your fellow man, being atomized into tiny housing, watching a TV and barely leaving your home, not knowing who your neighbors are, right? So Wes, what do you think of the self-determination theory?
Yeah, so maybe we can each take one of them. So it's community,
autonomy,
competency,
and competence.
Yep, got it. So why don't we each take one of them? I'll take the competence. That for me is huge for a man personally, and I probably get too much value out of it. Like I probably take it to an unhealthy degree because I'm always trying to prove something to somebody or a group of people, including myself. But huge, like I have a core belief that is, if you want to earn any rewards, whether that be financial rewards, a woman, etc., it doesn't matter. We are so blessed and fortunate because as men, all we have to do is become highly competent in just a few areas and primarily work. Like if there's nowhere else to get competent, it's like get phenomenally competent at your craft and you'll be infinitely valuable to others. And then also simultaneously appealing to women that you're after, et cetera. So,
and Wes, can you distinguish your craft from your job for the men watching?
Yeah, exactly. I think a craft, number one, is something that you're passionate about, or at least passionate about climbing that ladder. Looking at something as your craft is way different than looking at something as your job. Something your job is you just mail it in, you check in the clock in the morning, and you check it out at night. Versus, honestly, what I would say, and this is not to butter him up, but like when I hear Kaizen talk about what he does, or like that he's taking the weekends to research what he does. He's going and taking extra courses. He's doing all these extra things. That is a craftsman, right? No different than when I go and talk to the guy who does my shoes. Like I could talk to him for an hour about shoe polish because he's so committed to his craft. Like he wants to become a master at it. And that's what I think all of us men should do. Mm-hmm. Like, and if you're not interested, then change it. Go and find another craft. Right, like that you actually do want to put all of your heart and soul into, and if you want some like motivation, like go watch what is it called, The Last Samurai movie, or go watch Jiro Dreams of Sushi, where literally like every single inch of that guy's path when it comes to his quote career, he wants to perfect. So much so to the point where he has his son work for years on just one ingredient, rice, which is like one of the most basic.
Not even cooking it, just like rinsing it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I would say. I can very much get on board with that triad, the competency part of that triad. Guys, and I'll throw it over to you, but what's one of the triad that you would like to chat about?
I like the community aspect a lot, and I think I'm not sure if they touch on it in the book or not, but the difference. I've been noticing it a lot more. My girlfriend that I moved with now is Mexican. She was born in Mexico and is here on a visa. And that, what Ray said really is true. Like people that were born in Mexico versus people that are Mexican born here in the United States have a totally different perspective. Like we were talking about this literally last night. And the community aspect down there is way bigger. It's way more important. Like they talk to each other a lot more. There's not like situations where you don't know who your neighbor are. Like they're able to talk to each other a lot easier. And I think like, especially in the United States, there's been a shift in focus on more of the individual and more of like marketing that directs towards what people lack and to make them feel insecure, to drive them to buy things versus coming from a place of only buying basically like what's necessary, like being with this girl who was an immigrant. And when I first met her, you see like people that come to America that have like nothing. They're like bare bones, living like Spartans basically. And to an extent, I think that's like really admirable. I think it makes you realize what's actually important. It's not like all the little frills and stuff that we add onto everything, like being in communication with your family, with your community, having that sense of belongingness in that way, I think makes a big difference in what could potentially like keep people from being depressed or feeling like these mental issues is that sense of belonging in the tribe or the community or whatever it is. Because when you isolate yourself, I think that's where a lot of that kind of stuff can kind of creep in.
100%. And I don't think the nice thing about the modern age, the contemporary time we live in, is that yes, all these technological trappings can isolate us, but also used correctly, they have the power to accelerate community. You know, like we are talking to each other from different parts of the continent. We come together on Discord, we come together online, and so that sense. The nice thing I also like is you don't have to be part of a tribe to have a tribe. Like you don't have to have indigenous blood. You know, you don't have to be a part of a community in that like you're not bound, you're not limited by who's in your neighborhood. You know, like I like how especially with the assistance of online communication, you can find your tribe.
Yep, 100%. So Ray, what's the third part of that triad that you could leave?
So thanks for giving me the hard one, guys. So that the competence, community, and what the author calls feeling authentic in their lives or autonomy. Yeah. And so for me, that means being my own boss now. I have my own art gallery business and art consulting business. This is the first time I've ever been an entrepreneur, and it just feels like the right fit. Not having to take orders from someone, not having to march to the beat of someone else's drum. Now, for everybody out there who can get up in the morning, can clear their inbox, can execute their assigned tasks, there's no problem with working for somebody else. It's just that is not my that is not the best medium for my work, for my execution, right? Yeah. So autonomy for me means the first thing that comes to mind is being an entrepreneur and being my own boss. But then I think of it in my family as well, like being the head of a household, which is weird because my dad's still alive and I've gotten a big extended family. But to think of me, my daughter, my wife as a family unit, that whatever drama is going on in my extended family, we have autonomy. We can have a peaceful, happy home, the three of us, because of that sense of autonomy. The choices we can make are not constrained by what grandma or what uncle, what drama they're pouring on the matter. Same as if you're working at a company where the boss or Phil from accounting or whoever is driving you crazy. So autonomy doesn't exclusively mean being your own boss of your own company, but it's a guaranteed way to feel it.
Yeah, and I think also to riff off of that, I think we can also provide autonomy to each other, anybody who we work with, even though we might be tied in a same dynamic. Let's just say that's a partnership relationship. It is a boss to employee relationship, or no matter what way the arrows directionally point. It's, can I respect you enough and you respect me enough, no matter where we're at, even in our skill level, can I give you a sense of autonomy, and can you give me the respect of the same? You know, it's like, even though we might be in the same box of a dynamic called we're working at McDonald's together, can I let you autonomously handle the hamburgers and I autonomously handle the French fries? So
and that's a great point. That's a great point that I didn't think of, is like another way you can help your brother is by not just claiming autonomy, claiming competence, and claiming community the way I was thinking, or taking it for yourself, but providing autonomy.
Yep.
Providing competence would be like teaching, right? Skills, helping your brother with his skills, and providing a sense of community is reaching out and welcoming brothers into our community. So that's an excellent point of these are not just things you can take or achieve. They're also things you can give and spread.
100%.
Right on.
Cool. Awesome. What's the next point on the book, brother? So we're now on point number 4.
We're on 3 now. So we did the homeless man, we did the anecdote of the homeless man taking responsibility for his brother.
Yep.
We've done the self-determination theory of autonomy, competence, community. And now number 3 is happiness. And so, and we touched on this already, but then we're just going to do a deep dive into happiness now, where, let's see, although happiness is notoriously subjective and difficult to measure, mental illness is not. Numerous cross-cultural studies have shown that modern society, despite its nearly miraculous advances in medicine, science, and technology, is afflicted with some of the highest rates of depression, schizophrenia, poor health, anxiety, and chronic loneliness in human history. So, and they mentioned suicide. For example, in American Indian tribes, suicide was understood to apply in a very narrow set of circumstances, such as old age to avoid burdening the tribe, or a ritual sacrifice in a grief following the death of a spouse, or in a hopeless but heroic battle with an enemy, which they considered a kind of suicide, right? Mm-hmm. And so, can you guys riff on why you think happiness is such a problem for we that have everything?
Oh, I got something to say on this, but Kaizen, please, sir. Especially because you're drinking a Topo Chico. Dude, you're always beating me. Topo Chico is so good.
It's always stunting on you.
It's hard to find, too. You have to go places to get it. They're always sold out. I think a lot of it is people have a lot more leisure time. So especially if you are doing like a 9-to-5 or something where you're not like in a role of autonomy, that gives you a lot of downtime. And then it's one of those things that maybe like subconsciously you're not finding meaning, you're not finding like purpose, and then you're just stagnating. And in the back of your mind, you know, one day you're going to die and you're wasting this time not doing something. So when you have like the leisure time and you're not working towards something, especially like as a man, it's in your biology to constantly like grow and conquer and do things and make things and like just keep progressing
and lead.
When you literally like
protect
that and you like try to lay back, or you try to like, it's different from like recovering when you're like resting, recovering, recuperating, versus when you're just stagnating. Like there should be a purpose for one versus the other. You should either be working or you should be like resting your body, recovering, and preparing to put out, like you're expanding and contracting, and not just like one or the other, so you don't like burn out. And that's where I think a lot of disharmony could come from, where people feel unhappy. And then also just not having like realistic ideas of what will actually make them happy. Like taking the materialistic route of like what media and like society in America especially will portray as what makes you happy. A lot of the times, like those celebrities that are on like the yachts or have all the things that you think would make you happy are the most miserable, because they don't have the things that we talked about earlier, like the community, the sense of purpose, things like that.
Oh, dude, guys, I think perfectly said. I have to admit that I think I personally heard it best stated from Tony Robbins that happiness is progress. I don't know if he made that quote or not, but it's just brilliantly concise. And which, number one, I completely agree with it. Happiness is progress. It implies there is a force that you have to push against to make progress from and overcome it. And in so doing that distance is the happiness. But then also it's perpetual. It keeps on going. It doesn't matter what status you reach or what level of wealth you reach, or what, it doesn't matter. It's, you still have to make progress from that point. So yeah, Kaizen, I think you said it beautifully. The only thing I would add is happiness is progress. Ray, what are your thoughts, brother?
I have nothing to add to that, man. I mean, I thought of Ryan's contribution. I bring it up all the time, is activity-based quality time as a way to enrich your relationships with family or your spouse or your kids. So for example, Sarah and I do ballroom dancing now on your recommendation, on your advice. And it is activity-based quality time is progress. We're trying to build something. But I don't want to add anything else to what Kaizen said because he just nailed it. I want to move on to the next item. Sound good?
Yeah, and we're always going to do. We're going to try our best to do 2 bonus. It's normally we were originally going to do 3 points from the book, but from each chapter we're going to try to do 2 bonus points every time if there's room for it. So we're on the 4th one, right?
Bonus number 1. There's some fascinating science he talks about in terms of the this disassociation that we feel begins at birth. The alienating effects of wealth and modernity on the human experience start virtually at birth and never let up. Infants in hunter-gatherer societies are carried by their mothers as much as 90% of the time, which roughly corresponds to carrying rates among other primates. So picture hunter-gatherers, picture apes and chimps in the jungle, little baby hanging off mommy, even when she's running around in the jungle. In America during the 70s, mothers maintained skin-to-skin contact with babies as little as 16% of the time, which is a level that traditional societies would probably consider a form of child abuse. And in the 80s, 85% of young children slept alone in their room, a figure that rose to 95% among families considered well-educated. So again, this reinforces for me that richer families, like I'm one of 5 kids, and so I mean I had a lot of blessings, and there were times where we were flush with cash, and times where we were absolutely broke with like the water and the electricity getting shut off and everything. So dizzying highs and terrible lows. I always shared a room because, with 5 kids, I mean they hardly make houses big enough for a family that big, right? And so I guess I always had that sense of community. Because of the proximity, but our daughter, we have 1 child. She lives alone. She has her own room. She has her own bathroom. And to some parents, you might think you're providing more than you had growing up. Do you know what I mean? Like providing a better life than you had. But I'm not sure that that's paying big dividends for the kid to have them isolated like that.
Yeah, Kaizen, what are your thoughts on that, dude?
That's kind of like a paradox because on one side, like you want to be able to provide for your kids, but you like the examples used a lot when people will talk about like a superstar, a successful person, and then their kid is like a drug addict or something, and like this kid who had everything given to him for
Joe Biden, Hunter Biden.
Exactly. Like, and then people don't feel like sympathy for those kind of people because they're like, well, they had everything given to them. Well, that kind of like alludes to the need to like the skin to skin oxytocin, all of that, like hugging your kids, spending time with them, that activity pace, like all of this kind of like ties in together. If you're not doing these types of things, then that's going to create like mental disharmony within the family unit, because if the kid's not feeling like they're a part of the family, like they're separated, they're isolated, whatever you want to call it, even if you're like, because I think a lot of the times where this stems from is people that get like ultra successful, instead of spending time with their family, they'll pay. So they'll pay to have like tutors, or they'll pay to have people take them to the activities, and then they can tell themselves that they're, I'm doing this for my kid, I'm doing this, but they're not actually like spending time with them. Mm-hmm. So that's where you kind of have to like go in that gray area and figure out what's actually providing for your kid. Is it being able to give them this stuff, or is it being able to spend time with them and help them in kind of like different ways?
Oh yeah, I mean, and Ray hit on slightly on some of the data on this. The data, I think, is like, it was very eye-opening for me. And I pair this with, I think, what Jordan Peterson was saying one point. There was some, orphanage in England somewhere. And apparently it was like 75% of the kids died in that orphanage, like consistently over time, because they never got, or it may have been all orphanages. And then they found that there was one one location where basically all the kids survived. And I think that her name was, that they named her Fat Ida or something like that, where they found out that kids were not passing away in that particular location because the cleaning lady whose name was Ida would carry the kids around with her in some sort of apparatus so they could touch her skin. And like, she would, I don't know, she would just clean and fucking, walk around with them. Apparently it was that skin to skin contact. It was that nurturing love. So it's pretty extreme. Like, I was very surprised when I heard it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was an Joe Rogan was interviewing Sebastian Junger once, and he had this kind of like smug, kind of like Clint Eastwood way of talking. He's like, no, my family and I sleep on a mat, like Japanese dojo style or something like that. I was like, I mean, he seems to, so he was very much affected by the research, you know? And I mean, it makes me think of a couple of things. I know a family, they all sleep in the same bed together, the kids and the parents. And it seems crazy. And it seems like you're stunting the development of the kid. That was the first thought, but it might be the opposite.
Yep.
Where you're making them more emotionally secure because like we tend to bond, like go through an important developmental stage of bonding with stuffed animals instead of with a human, so that was fascinating to me. And it also made me think of some friends of mine who were born into extraordinary wealth, and the parents relieved them of the burden of fending for themselves. The parents relieved them of the burden of having to be a dishwasher or a busboy or work construction. But unfortunately, they were robbed of so many essential life skills as a result. So yes, they have money, but depression, pills, and alcohol are just like just mandatory for them.
Yeah, it seems to me, what I hear you saying, Ray, is the antidote is work. And
I wish it weren't so, Wes. I wish it weren't so.
Yeah, right. In letting somebody do their own work, they get to experience the rewards as well. They get to see the positive impact of their efforts and then get rewarded. And you can do that in perpetuity.
And like Kaizen said, it is a bit of a paradox that if you want a kid to grow up to be a well-adjusted adult, you need to baby them when they're, and if you want your kid to grow up to be a well-adjusted adult with a comfortable job, you need to put them in hardship.
Yep.
It's a paradox.
Exactly.
So thank you for that contribution. I want to move to the fifth one. With the fifth point is more fun. There's a bunch of very vivid images in this book where like I alluded to before, they talk about the fact that natives who were integrated into American society in the colonial period almost always preferred to go back to like the modest and meager itinerant life of the tribe, nomadic life of the tribe. And then that was even true of Western white European British colonial Americans who might have been kidnapped at the frontier to an Indian tribe. When they were rescued back into Western civilization, they sometimes elected to go back into the wild. So here's the quote from Philadelphia's favorite son, Benjamin Franklin. He wrote to a friend in 1753, "When an Indian child has been brought up among us, taught our language, and habituated to our customs, if he goes to see his relations and makes one Indian ramble with them, there is no persuading him to ever return." I suppose an Indian ramble is either a walk in the park or a hunt or some kind of like adventure where they all have to pull their own weight, right? On the other hand, Franklin continued, white captives who were liberated from the Indians were almost impossible to keep at home. Though ransomed by their friends and treated with all imaginable tenderness to prevail with them to stay among their English, Yet in a short time, they become disgusted with our manner of life and take the first good opportunity of escaping again into the woods. So I just love this. And I mean, Hollywood has played on this many times, right? With like Call of the Wild, Dances with Wolves, Last of the Mohicans, Grey Wolf. I just love the idea. So for me, I love the idea of not abandoning all technology and going and living in a treehouse, but learning what we can from these indigenous tribes. You know, indigenous art is a very popular kind of fad in contemporary art right now, which is my business. But I think again, rather than a fad, I think there's something essential about living well that we can learn from Aboriginal tribes, Native tribes, the way we used to do things before we all had iPhones.
Oh, without a doubt. Kaizen, what are your thoughts on that, brother?
Yeah, Kaizen, what do you think? What do you think might explain why people prefer tribal life?
So, like what you just said reminded me of, I think I brought it up before, there's a book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's more of like a famous book, but if you haven't read that, I would check it out. And in that book, I don't remember the exact way he phrased it, but it was like a quote that you can find Zen in everything. So in like a computer and like technology and stuff. And people would, I think a lot of the times, like now, people have this idea that it's one or the other. It's one extreme or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to go live naked in the woods and eat berries and chew on squirrels to survive, or you have to be surrounded by monitors and screens and phones and stuff. And what I think the marriage between the two would be is finding the Zen, being able to be in like a flow state. I think that's why people lean towards going back into nature, because when you're like having to work and survive, you're not looking for distractions. You're not trying to escape reality. So you're like present. And that I think is what people get a hard on for. That's what people are like want, is to be present. They want to be like not distracted by thinking about bullshit like drama, this or that, or whatever clickbait stuff. They want to be like present. That's like when you feel the best, like your mood overall, your mental health, everything. It's just like being present and being in a flow state. So that it's easier, I think, to do in the woods, but I don't think that that's necessarily the best way. I think if you can find a way to do that in modern society while still being able to be productive and be a productive member of society, but still finding a way to do that in a flow state and be present in the things that you do, I think that's probably like the best bet.
Yeah, and I don't know, this sounds weird, but what comes up from you when you say that, Kaizen, is also the word in, like being in the woods or being in the game, not just watching the game, not just looking at this screen and watching other people do their game. It's like being actually three-dimensionally involved inside of it, being immersed inside of it, so that we can make progress inside of that game.
Mm-hmm.
Kaizen, you got some crazy wisdom, man. I love you.
Oh yeah, dude.
You got a way of like just capturing it. So gentlemen, that was the first chapter of Tribe.
Hell yeah.
And I encourage you all to read it. This is maybe the third time I'm reading it. I just love these anecdotes about people longing for the sense of meaning in the tribal life. And everything else we talked about really just struck a chord with me. And like Kaizen said, we don't need to go live in a treehouse somewhere to achieve this. Like our challenge is to achieve this through our men's group in the work that we do with our families.
Hell yeah. Love it, dude. So how about Ray, what are you thinking? And Kaizen, what are your thoughts? How about, what do you think? Because this book is not incredibly long.
No, I think we can do this in 4 sessions.
So you want to do next 3? How many chapters are there total?
There are 4.
Okay, hence the 4 sections.
So we're a quarter through. So we can either do it Monday, Friday, Monday, or we can do it every Friday.
Yeah, why don't we try to get through this quickly if you're cool with it? Why don't we do the next 2 chapters on Monday? Is that cool?
2 chapters on Monday.
And Kaizen, if you're down for it, I think you already read it. So if you're down for it, let's do it. Cool. All right, dudes. Have an awesome
Thank you,
weekend.
gentlemen.
Later, bros.